Welcome, everyone. This is your moderator, Elsie Kerns, and tonight we have a special guest, Pam Younghans, and she is a well-known astrologer, and we're actually going to set sail with her tonight in uncharted waters as we begin 2021. So I will just immediately turn things over to Pam.
Great.
So Pam, take it away. I'm gonna.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'm not, there we go. Okay. All right, so welcome everybody. So exciting. Oh, 111 people right now. Perfect
Yeah.
starting place. I always want to thank Elsie for putting this all together behind the scenes. She is a techno whiz and she takes care of all of the pre-webinar business. So I really appreciate that. I get to just focus on what we're going to talk about. And so I really appreciate your work, Elsie. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who's here. I just want to start off and, there was that question, I think, from Gwen saying, I hope you're going to give us all, that tell us it's going to be easy. I don't think that's going to be exactly what I'm going to talk about today, but I am going to talk about actually how we can make it easier, because I'm going to talk about why or how we can move through this time with more grace and ease, and really choosing to do that and choosing how to do that is going to put us in alignment with the higher purposes of these times. So that is my intention. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll just get started with the webinar here. Okay. Okay, so uncharted waters, setting sail. Yeah, so uncharted waters. The reason I chose that title is because we really are at a new place for humanity. You can say this is another choice point. We have had choice points in the past, Atlantis, Lemuria, all of those civilizations that had choice points, and this is ours. And so evidently from what we hear, there are a lot of channels out there bringing through information, and most of them are saying this is a positive event. The intention is for us to move through it and to come out the other side successfully. And yet this is uncharted waters. So how we navigate this time is really up to each one of us. So we're here in 2021, and it really is our evolutionary challenge. It's basically one of the main reasons we chose to be here on the planet at this time. This is why we are here. Of course, we all have subsets. We all have personal agendas, our soul's agendas. But as a humanity, this generation that is on the planet at this time, this is our evolutionary challenge. This is why, one of the big reasons why we're here. So if you wonder what your divine purpose is, think about holding love and holding light during a very tumultuous time. So I actually want to quote something here today from Nancy Leela Ward. She sent out a newsletter that I just got this morning, and she talks about this loop that we've been in for centuries, repeating the dark and the light, the fear, the hate, love, that imbalance, that battle. As she says, now is the time to deactivate this loop, demagnetize it, and this is what we came here to do. So astrologically, the main influences going on in 2021, I'm going to go through these rather quickly. We have the Pluto-Eris square. This has actually been in effect throughout 2020 as well, and we'll talk about each one of these. We have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that just occurred on the solstice in December, but we're still in the energy of it. And actually the energy of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction does carry through the next 20 years. And then we have the Saturn-Uranus square, which is building in effect now, and which to me is the main player for 2021. So I've created this graph basically to show you the energy fields we'll be in. So you'll see the little legend across the top. The purple is the Jupiter-Saturn alignment. It's coming down in effect right now because they were exact to the degree, again, as I said, on the solstice. And now the energy of that exact conjunction is falling away rather rapidly as those two planets separate. But as I said, those wavy lines that you see behind everything is really the energy of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. And that does influence everything, even though the exact conjunction is now fading away. We see the Pluto-Eris square, that's the gray. And you can see I've included where it was in the past. So I think it was exact either November or December, but fairly recently. So it's coming off of a high energy level. It's dipping down here until April, and then it'll increase again. It's exact again in August and then in October. So I'm hoping this is making sense how I've created this graph. Now the energy of Saturn, the Saturn-Uranus square, that has just been building since Saturn entered Aquarius. And that is building really rapidly. And it's exact for the first time in February. It'll fade off a little bit. It'll be exact again in June, fade off again, and it'll be back finally in December before it's complete. So this to me is the biggest energy, and you can see it is very strong throughout this entire year. So let's talk about this square. As I said, it's exact. I mean, it's in effect throughout the year. Those are the exact dates. February 17th will be the one that we'll look at during this class. It is an evolutionary challenge. It requires us to think in new ways, consider alternative realities and solutions. It is a test of those new solutions. And there is going to be ongoing resistance to change throughout 2021. That is the meaning of a square. A square means, oh, it's not like we just roll out of bed one morning and all of a sudden we're in this new energy. A square means there's resistance to the change, and this is the challenge of this time. So, and some of the challenges of this time involve social unrest and resistance, rebellion against authority, and we're already definitely seeing that. Now, Saturn, Uranus, all two planets have a cycle. They have a time when they're conjunct, and then they go through a cycle until they are conjunct again. So we can look at the Saturn-Uranus cycle and say, well, what's been going on over time with these two planets? And if you were in the paradigm shift class, you've seen some of this information. So the last conjunction of Saturn-Uranus was in 88, 89. And what I'm listing here are some of the global events. But while you're thinking about those years, think about what was going on in your life. What began then? But it was the beginning of this cycle, the beginning of a process. There were major political changes. Saturn always brings in something about politics and government. That's a part of what it rules. That was when there was perestroika in the USSR, revolutions, big economic issues, and the Berlin Wall came down in 89. Then in 99, 2000, that was a waxing square, the first time Saturn and Uranus interacted in the cycle after their conjunction. Now, that period was actually noted for Earth changes and weather events. And what's interesting is that at that time, Uranus was in Aquarius, Saturn was in Taurus. Currently, those are reversed. Uranus is in Taurus and Saturn is in Aquarius. So I'm kind of thinking that we are going to see some more of these kind of Earth changes during this time frame. 2008 to 2010, that was the opposition. We know there were global economic challenges, but we also did elect the first African-American US president. So we can see the big changes, the social, political changes that were a part of that time. And now we have the waning square, final phase of the cycle. We are completing a process that began at the conjunction. So again, in your personal life, see if you can tap into what was going on in 88, 89, then in 99, 2000, 2008, 2010, and how does that relate to this year? What's that next step in the process? And of course, we do have another big event, many big events going on politically, but we have just elected the first woman and multiracial vice president in the US. Social and political effects, our challenge is to build processes and systems, that's Saturn's job, based on a longer term vision, which is Uranus, to find new ways of relating to our physical world and resources. To succeed in passing this test, we have to work together. And that's, of course, the challenge. We are so divided. But it is by working together that we find the innovative solutions for the issues that are before us. Possible challenges during this time, economic issues, unemployment, we know that that's a part of this year. Dealing with the pandemic, that is a big part of what many people are experiencing. Frustrations with restrictions and social unrest, we've certainly seen that. And then earth changes similar to 1999, 2000. Personal and spiritual effects. These planets working together do stimulate an awakening of consciousness. We become aware of old patterns and perspectives and attitudes that are just too restrictive and limiting, and it's our opportunity to make a new choice about those patterns, perspectives, and attitudes. We are reforming what is no longer useful, no longer serves a creative purpose. We're also learning to apply the law of attraction through modifying our vibrational frequency. In this time of lockdowns and feeling like we're limited in our ability to take action, this is where we can really start working on what does it mean if I hold the energy of joy or love as compared to what happens if I hold the energy of fear and anger. This is our opportunity to play with those different effects and to see what a difference it makes in our day-to-day lives, and ultimately what a difference it makes in our longer term as well. So many starts and stops, breakdowns and breakthroughs during this time, and this is a part of the square as well. But we've got so many positive potentials. The square is here because we are needing to be pushed. We're not going to get there without being pushed. If everything was going according to our conscious plan, we would continue to go down the same course of action. And we know for many reasons that's not workable. So Saturn, using discipline to find innovative solutions to social problems. That's the combination of Saturn and Uranus working together well. Using science to understand and attend to environmental issues. That's another positive effect of this time. Creating new forms of community. We already see that kind of happening, and that's going to increase. Finding a new balance between the social freedoms that we feel like we really need and the need for structure. We are able to do an objective appraisal and reform of all that no longer serves a purpose. And this really is a global awakening of learning to trust our inner knowing above all else. And if there's any upside to all of the disinformation that we receive, this is our opportunity to really say, what does my internal knowing tell me? And that's what we are learning to trust above all else. All right, now the Pluto-Eris square, as I said, it was exact 3 times in 2020. It's exact twice more in 2021. It is with us throughout the year, but again, going to be heightened energies in August, September, and October. This is the controversy and divisiveness that we've seen. We're becoming aware of our own shadow as we see it reflected in mass consciousness. It does bring forward things of injustice and unfair treatment, resistance from those who feel discounted or rejected. And we see it in recent past through the Me Too, Black Lives Matters movements that have come forward. And so we do expect to see some more of this in 2021, especially towards that August, September, October timeframe. So we are going to focus in on January, April from here. And I just wanted to call out that section of that graph. So we have the Pluto-Eris square, again, basically in effect all year, but right now subsiding a little bit. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, exact energy of it is diminishing rather rapidly, but again, remember that those wavy lines indicate, we could call it the age of Aquarius. I prefer to just call it the energy of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. And then the energy of the Saturn-Uranus square, you can see is rising, of course, rather rapidly and will be very strong throughout this time frame. So I just want to mention that before I go to the calendars, and I'm going to, let's see, go out of that and go to this. I just want to say that while I would like to just say rosy picture, these 2 months, January, February, and actually the first 4 months of the year are going to be the most challenging. So this is the kind of a gird your loins moment. And it's not just sit here with our fingers dug into the tabletop and trying to figure, just holding on for dear life. This is where we get to make those decisions as spiritually aware people of what energy do I want to hold? How do I want to contribute to our evolution going forward? So, and I know it's a challenge. It's hard not to dip into those lower vibrational emotions and thought patterns. I think we all struggle with that, but this is the challenge. This is the evolutionary challenge that we're in. All right, so let's go ahead and look at January. So we see these little starbursts, and I love what Elsie said in our Be Live yesterday on YouTube. I think she said something like, these are when we're supposed to pay special attention. And I completely agree. These dates are, of course, when there may be bigger events out there in the world. However, the way we want to use them, the way we can best use them, is by saying, okay, I need to focus inward now. I need to really strengthen my inner core. I really need to hold my energy in my heart on these days so that I keep my vibration high rather than dipping into some of these places of fear or anger or any of those other kinds of lower vibrational emotions and thought patterns. Now, we are here, of course, on the 13th. So we've been through a bit of this month already, almost halfway. That's hard to believe. I do want to mention here, now we all know what happened last Wednesday. There's not a starburst on that day, but Mars did enter Taurus on that day. And I said this in my journal for this week, is that once Mars entered Taurus, it was actually setting up quite a bit of big energy. We can see Mercury squaring Mars on the 8th. We can see Mars squaring Saturn today. And the big one, well, we can also see Mars squaring Jupiter on the 22nd. And the big one is Mars conjunct Uranus. So really, as soon as Mars entered Taurus, it started activating all of these really big energies that are coming up here. So this is why I'm saying this is a really powerful month. It's a really pivotal month. And we do want to pull out all of our spiritual tools at this time. All right, so let's just start from where we are and move forward. Talk about that new moon that was last night, actually early this morning for some time zones. I'm going to have a different slide for every lunation, every new moon and every full moon. So I won't spend a long time on this, but it is a big energy. And remember, the energy that's set at a new moon really carries through the next 4 weeks. So this new moon was conjunct Pluto, and that is indicative of a major time of change. It was also on the anniversary of the Saturn-Pluto alignment back in 2020. And so it's kind of doubling down on the issues of that Saturn-Pluto alignment, which are a lot about dismantling the old governmental structures, dismantling old social structures, really revealing where there are holes in the bucket. And again, requiring that we move through this and become more empowered and change what needs to be changed. So this is a very pivotal time in many, many ways. Mars squaring Saturn today. That is some frustrations, and Sun squaring Eris. Those are also frustrations and some fears. Those are definitely kind of the anticipation of, oh my gosh, what's next kind of moment. We do have Uranus going direct and exactly conjunct Pluto tomorrow. So this is new beginnings in a big, big way. Uranus is about making those changes going forward. And anytime Uranus is strong, which a planet is very strong when it either goes direct or goes retrograde because it comes to a standstill, this is a powerful time of change. And this really reverberates into at least a week before and a week after that exact date. That Sun conjunct Pluto, really an indicator of the big changes that are involved right now, the big transformation. You know, Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth. And so we really are dismantling the old in a really big way. And Sun is about our individual identities in many ways. And so a large part of what we're going through is not only global, political, social, it's very personal. We are in this place of really figuring out, who am I all over again? And I think, you know, as harsh and as problematic as all of the pandemic issues are and the lockdowns are, they really do require us to focus inward and to come to terms with who we are. And I think this Sun conjunct Pluto is a big part of that. The big one this week, and I am not going to talk about every single day, you'll see that I include Pallas Athena every time I can because I love her. She's just wisdom, goddess of wisdom, healing, and all of that. So you'll see her pop up from time to time. Probably won't talk about her very much, but I just like to include her because to me, where she appears on the calendar is a time when we can tap into our higher wisdom in a more powerful way. This Jupiter squaring Uranus on the 17th, that is a big energy again. Anytime we see Uranus deals in the unexpected. So no matter how we might predict this energy to unfold, there are going to be surprises here. And with something like Jupiter-Uranus square, even though it is exact on the 17th, we really already are feeling it. It's going to be in effect for several days, if not a couple of weeks on either side of that exact date, because these are two slower moving planets. And so they stay within range of being exactly square for a longer amount of time. So now, even though they're in hard aspect, Jupiter is in Aquarius, which is ruled by the planet Uranus. So we can actually tap into some of what we might think of as being more positive energies of this square, even though a square is confrontation. This allows us to tap into a greater sense of faith, to view events with the bigger picture in mind, even with a sense of optimism. It really is a turning point, however. There is a sense of a sudden change in destiny. We can also have sudden aha moments, a sudden recognition of something that we hadn't realized before. And then there's also the disruptive side, Jupiter emphasizing, magnifying all of the changes that Uranus can represent, the sudden events, the unexpected surprises, which we know are already strong because of Uranus stationing direct. And then we have Mars conjunct Uranus. And I do believe that we're already well in the energy of this. This is on the 20th, so this is a very powerful day, as we know, in the United States. We can say fireworks. Mars is action. Mars is anger. Mars is assertiveness. Uranus is the rebel. Uranus is, I don't care what other people need or want, I'm going to do it my own way. So we just want to be sure that we carry our energy in an expansive way on that day and do our meditations and hold the energy of the light for the most positive outcomes of any events that might occur around that time. And then Mars goes on to square Jupiter. Now you can see this is why I'm saying what a strong month January is. Mars goes on to square Jupiter, and this really builds on the energy of that Jupiter-Uranus square. So throughout this week, lots of surprises, lots of unexpected events, lots of things that feel like they're out of control, which is why we have to say, oh, look, it's a starburst day. How do I bring my energy into my heart? How do I focus on the light coming to me, the light coming through me? How do I ground myself into the earth? It's a practice I do every day. I bring up the energy from the earth into my heart. I bring down the energy from, I say, the highest celestial energy that is available to me. And I bring that down into my heart, and then I bring it down all the way through my body and down into the core of the earth. And so that we become a conduit for this higher frequency into the earth, and yet we are also grounded and anchored into the earth. And I think practices like this, the more we can do this during these times, the better we will feel and the more positive effect we will have. We're not just at the whim of destiny here or the whim of circumstances. They remember this is an evolutionary challenge, and part of the challenge is, how do I hold the energy of light and love in a challenging time? Now, Sun conjunct Saturn, this is very interesting. This actually is triggering that Saturn-Uranus square. We can see Sun aligns with Saturn on the 23rd, and then, very quickly is also square Uranus. So watch events on these days. Typically Sun conjunct Saturn is a more serious time. It's like, okay, let's get our ducks in order. Let's pay attention. Let's make a plan. Saturn's all about setting a goal and working towards it. This is happening in Aquarius. Aquarius is a very socially oriented sign. So this may be, how do we really establish new social rules that are actually going to work, that are going to make the changes that need to be made? But again, we do have the rebel part coming in. Sun squaring Uranus. So whatever rules are set up, there's going to be resistance to them. And that's a part of this energy. Our job is to find ways not to make everybody happy, because that's going to a superficial level. It's how do we make this work for everybody? And how do we work with everybody? Now, on that same day, we have Neptune squaring the nodes. So the nodal axis has a lot to do with where we've come from and where we're going to on an evolutionary level. So this is really, Neptune's helping us let go of the past, our beliefs of the past. The South Node is in Sagittarius, which rules belief systems. Neptune squaring the node says, okay, I'm now ready to let go of old beliefs, self-righteousness, and just looking at the negative side of Sagittarius, self-righteousness, dogmatism. Neptune's trying to help us let go of those lower vibrational responses, so that we can move into the higher vibration of the North Node, which happens to be in Gemini, which is open-minded and open to new ideas and just generally willing to talk. Now, the last couple of days of the month, we see Venus involved pretty strongly. So Venus does rule relationships. It also rules the economy. So I'm thinking there will be some information coming forward at this time about the economic situations globally. It's not just the US, it's globally. We're all being affected at the same time. And then we have the full moon on the 28th, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. We also want to note that Mercury stations retrograde on the 30th of the month. So that gives us about the next 3 weeks to do a review of, what choices we've made, what decisions we've made, that kind of thing, which is standard for Mercury being retrograde. All right, let's go quickly through the new moon. This is just, I'm going to include the chart for each one of the lunations. As we saw, this is a pretty powerful one. Sun, moon, Pluto, all aligned there. It's creating a stellium. And this is really indicating, again, this is a really powerful lunar cycle. It's going to involve a lot of change. It's going to involve a lot of feeling like things are outside of our control, which is why it's about personal empowerment, because when things externally are outside of our control, we go inward. We say, I am in control of my mental state. I am in control of my emotional state. This is where my power lies. And then the full moon, which is in Leo on the 28th. This is also a very strong one, because if you can see here, and I'll grab a little line. So we've got full moon is always when the moon is exactly opposite the sun. And we can see that at the time of the full moon, the sun is exactly conjunct Jupiter and not very far away from Saturn. It is also squaring in a hard angle to Uranus and Mars. So this is kind of a double whammy. First of all, it's bringing up the Jupiter-Saturn alignment themes again. It's saying, what are these ideals? What are these Aquarian ideals that we brought forward in such a big way on the solstice? I don't know if you were one of those that participated in the Uluru ceremonies just remotely, but remember, if you did participate, that heart opening that occurred at that time, the feeling of love, the feeling of, not directed towards, but that feeling of expansiveness. Remembering that love is an intention, it's not a feeling. We can feel it, but it's an intention. How do I want to carry love and those Aquarian ideals forward in every day of my life? Now, because the full moon also squares Uranus and Mars, it's really triggering the influences of the Saturn-Uranus square that's coming up in February. So big changes here. This is a very emotional time. Full moons are always enhancing our emotional state. So this is an opportunity to find new balance for ourselves. Full moons are always sun opposite moon. How do I find the balance place? How do I find that balance place between getting what I need and want, which is kind of a Leo type of thing? How do I feel like I fit in here? How do I get my needs met? Versus the Aquarius, what about greater society? And so that's the question that comes forward at this full moon. And of course, we have the Uranus and Mars, which creates unpredictable responses from people who might be harboring anger about some of those themes. All right, so let's go on to February. A lot fewer starbursts, which is a relief. We still do have kind of a focal point here. I'm going to talk about the rest of the month, of course, but that new moon on the 11th is something that's caught my eye for months. And we'll talk more about it when we get there, but it is a big event. It feels like it's maybe even bigger than the actual Saturn-Uranus square. But let's start at the beginning of the month, just keeping in mind that this is, again, a very strong energy month. Let's see, going to my notes here just a second. Now, what's interesting is that when we start February, we have 5 planets plus Pallas Athena all in Aquarius. So half of the planets are in Aquarius. So we've got this sense of, wow, really big change, social change, desire for the new, progress, very progressive energy that we have throughout the first part of this month. Now, we do have some either relationship or financial, economic challenges here at the very beginning, that the 5th and the 6th. Venus conjunct Saturn is saying, okay, it's time to get serious. You know, here are the limitations. Here's the plan. Here's the goal. This is the time to, set those goals and be clear, to be disciplined, to be responsible. But then again, Venus squaring Uranus the next day means people are going to rebel against it. Somebody is going to rebel. If we're talking about personal relationships, you get together and you say, this is just as an example, get together and you say, okay, this is our goal. This is how we're going to work on it. And within 20 minutes or so, or the next day, somebody's saying, oh, I don't want to do that. That's kind of the energy of that. However, we do have Venus sextile Chiron. So there's some possibility here of some softening, some healing of some of those themes that we may be feeling like are very sticky in certain relationships. Now, here in, oops, I keep grabbing the calendar instead of the little circle thing. Oops, did it. There we go. So looky here though. So the 8th and 9th, again, I'm pulling on my love of Pallas Athena. So Sun is conjunct Mercury on the 8th and then conjunct Pallas Athena on the 9th. Now remember, Mercury is retrograde. So this isn't going to be so much about, oh, here's a plan and let's go for it. This is very insightful, very intuitive, but it's like, okay, let's spend an even greater amount of time in the workroom, coming up with the hypothesis, coming up with the big ideas, in meditation, letting the download happen. That's great energy for those couple of days. Now, not everybody's going to agree with us. Mercury is squaring Mars the next day. And so this is resistance to new ideas. But here, looking along here, and we'll look at that new moon on the next slide. Mercury conjunct Venus. This is actually a lovely energy coming right after kind of big new moon. But Mercury conjunct Venus is, yeah, we can talk together. We can find harmony. We can find balance. And this is happening with the planets being in Aquarius. So this is about, oh, we can do this. We can communicate. We can be progressive. We can make decisions together for the betterment of all. That to me, now this, this isn't a huge influence, but I feel like the potentials are there that we can tap into. I also love that Mars is sextiling Neptune. This is about aligning, our personal will, the ego, with our souls. Neptune is a spiritual perspective. And so even after coming through a very kind of challenging new moon, it's kind of like a breakthrough time. We then move into some other energies that are really positive and hopeful. Mercury conjunct Jupiter. Again, Mercury's retrograde, but this is about expansive new ideas. Can't forget, however, we've got the Saturn-Uranus square that we talked about on those slides. So big potentials for personal growth in many, many ways. Yet we also have to be prepared for, the social unrest, everything that we talked about on those slides as well. Now, Mercury does go direct on the 20th, so that's going to kind of bring us out of the cave in some ways, and hopefully all the ideas that we've been, coming up with over these past couple of weeks, really we start to say, okay, and now we can start to implement them. Now we can move forward. So it's very interesting. After the new moon, after Saturn square Uranus for the time, it's like that's when we finally kick into gear and say, okay, now we can go. And look here, Mars trine Pluto on the 24th. This is empowering energy in a really positive way. This is a trine. So if this were a square, we'd be saying, oh, anger, unrest, but this is a trine. So this is about harnessing the power of our will to a higher purpose, to a higher mission. I always think of Pluto as also relating to our sense of mission on the planet. So this can be a very empowering time, building on, again, the ideas that we've come up with in the past few weeks. And then we had the full moon on the 27th. So we'll talk about those on the next couple of slides. Oh, W, that doesn't work. All right, Aquarius new moon. This is the big one on the 11th. And the reason it's so big is because we have, of course, all of these planets in Aquarius. The big part is here. We've got Moon, Sun, Pallas Athena, all within a couple of degrees in Aquarius. And those are all squaring Mars. And then the other planets in Aquarius are all squaring Uranus. So this is why this feels like such a big lunation. Now it's a new moon again, so it's setting the theme for the next 4 weeks. This is huge change. This is really saying, okay, if we're gonna do this, again, thinking the Saturn-Uranus square, if we're gonna make the changes that need to happen, we need to get serious. This is when we put, I don't know, we put the cabinet together, thinking of, political metaphors. But for our own lives, this is when we say, okay, big changes, how am I going to adapt and also set my own goals based on the idea that there need to be new directions. We're not going back to where it was. We're not going back to life as it was. And really, do we want to? This is the time when humanity is making the kinds of changes that are going to turn around the environmental problems. They're going to turn around the social problems. This is why it's such a big deal. I do like that, although it's a wide conjunction, this, I think Mercury's at about 16 degrees of Aquarius. It's still conjunct Pallas Athena, and so our opportunities in this lunar cycle have some really new, novel ideas. That's what Pallas Athena is all about. She is that wonderful goddess of wisdom, and she's very progressive. Being in Aquarius, she's able to see what needs to be done. So I like her, but again, this feels like a breakdown, breakthrough new moon because of that Uranian influence. If there are breakdowns, know that they are in preparation for the breakthroughs. And then the full moon on February 27th is in Virgo. It opposes Venus. I don't feel like that's a big negative. It just brings in the idea of, all right, we need to be conscious of other people, the relationship side of Venus. We need to use compassion. This is when the sun is in Pisces. Pisces is all about compassion, forgiveness. Can we forgive? That might be a huge part of this. Can we forgive? Because the moon in Virgo, I love moon in Virgo. I have my moon in Virgo. But moon in Virgo can be very strict. It's a perfectionist, and it wants to see an ideal being met. And so this full moon to me says, how do we keep our eye on the prize, the perfection that we want to achieve, but remember that we're all in this together? That's definitely Sun conjunct Venus in Pisces. I had a conversation about this with somebody on Facebook recently about, it's hard to say, I forgive this person for doing that, because as soon as you've said that, you're back in the energy of whatever the bad thing was that happened, and a part of you is back blaming. So what I like to do instead of that is to say, I am forgiveness. Then you don't have to hook it to anything or anyone, any situation. You just say, I am forgiveness, and that allows you to be that energy in a way that we might not be able to achieve otherwise. Now, one thing I do really like about this chart as well is that here we have Uranus at 7 degrees of Taurus, and it's actually trine the moon. So change, but in a good way, progress in a really positive way. So even after the tumult of the first part of the month, and that breakthrough of February 11th, new moon, this full moon really has some nice promise to it. We're still dealing with the Saturn-Uranus square, but that will be with us throughout the year. So it's not like all of a sudden, you know, the skies part and rainbows appear everywhere. But I feel like this is a really positive kind of turning point, coming to a new place within us. All right, so now we get into March. Again, fewer starbursts. Let's see what we've got. Interesting now. We have, now that Mercury's direct, it's going to be conjunct Jupiter again. And Mars enters Gemini. So we've got a lot of new ideas coming forward and an ability to implement something. Being willing to be open to those new ideas, being willing to be progressive. Gemini is eager for exchange. It's eager to communicate. So I feel like there's some real positive energy starting off the month of March. Sun conjunct Neptune, I feel like that's also quite lovely. That's occurring in Pisces. Again, it's another level of knowing we are one. It's the compassion, it's the understanding, it's the connection in spite of differences. And then we have the 13th, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Another conjunction with Neptune, Venus conjunct Neptune. So this is about being forgiveness in relationship. This is about softening differences. This is about bringing greater understanding into any relationship that we might have. And we have, oops, once again, I'm grabbing the computer. All right, let me grab this. There we go. I like Mercury entering Pisces. It'll be there for about 3 weeks. And that's really helpful for things like meditation and creativity, poetry writing. But it helps us kind of join our conscious reasoning mind with our intuitive mind. So that's, to me, a very helpful energy for this time as well. Again, Mercury conjunct Athena, this time direct. So implementing some of those brave new ideas, those more progressive ideas that you might have had. But now this is occurring in Pisces. So it's about how do we keep in mind the need for this to really be a compassionate idea, not just, oh, this is going to make a difference in this way or another way, but how do we bring caring and compassion into the new ideas as well. We have the equinox on the 20th. That's always a big time of new beginning. The sun enters Aries on that day. It is the first sign of the zodiac, just because, I mean, the zodiac is a circle, so there's no beginning and no end. But Aries is the initiator. So there's always that sense of new beginning with the equinox. And look here, Venus enters Aries the next day, Mercury sextile Uranus, Mars trine Saturn. These are all really positive energies. This is, you know, being willing to think outside the box, Mercury and Uranus, thinking in new ways, Mars trining Saturn, being able to apply, put our energy into something that's going to be substantial moving forward. However, we do have a starburst day, so again, grab your spiritual tools. Mercury's squaring Mars, and then Pluto is right there in the mix as well, in hard aspects to both Mars and Mercury. So this is kind of a contentious day, irritative, kind of more of the power struggle, but to me it feels like a reversion to what has been rather than a sense of, oh, this is where we're going. So keep that in mind. This is a throwback, kind of a throwback day. But we have the Sun conjunct Venus. Again, this is in Aries now, so it's time to make a new plan for a relationship or for your financial situation, new beginning. And Mars conjunct the North Node. This is lovely too. I mentioned before, the North Node is the direction we're going. It's kind of our evolutionary future. And Mars conjunct the North Node in Gemini says, these are the ideas, and this is the action we need to take to implement these ideas. So I feel that's a very positive energy as well. We'll talk about the full moon in another slide. And actually we're going to talk about the sun being conjunct Chiron at that time. Mercury is conjunct Neptune on the 29th. Again, a very nice time for, spending the day following your intuition, or meditating 3 times a day, or writing poetry, or automatic writing, or something like that, something that kind of moves you into other realms. Pisces is the sign that has to do with altered reality. It's heaven on earth kind of moment. And Mercury is our conscious mind. So really elevating our frequency on that day, knowing intuitively the right decisions to make, the right choices to make, and letting that guide us. All right, so let's move on to, and it's 4:56, so everything's in order, even though we will, of course, run a little over, no doubt. Oh, we have till 5:15 though, don't we? Okay, great. All right, so here's the Pisces new moon that's on the 13th. So let's see where we are with this. Oh, this is actually a Cazimi moon. Now, this was actually a new term for me, but it's actually very cool. So a Cazimi moon, I'm looking it up here. It's when the center of the moon, okay, forgive me for the technicalities here. I'm not really clear on it either, but it says that a Cazimi moon is when the center of the moon is within 17 arc minutes in longitude from the center of the sun. So it's kind of like if you were in on the last class, how we had Jupiter and Saturn at the same declination, kind of the same height in the sky. That's what this is, but they're so close. It's called a Cazimi moon. But what's cool about a Cazimi moon is that it's said to increase intuition and beneficial outcomes. So this is way so lovely. It is a new moon, so it's setting the theme for the next 4 weeks. It's also conjunct Neptune and conjunct Venus, which is also quite lovely. I mean, this is kind of like, okay, we are all one. I have compassion for all humankind. That kind of moment. It is a time when we can really pull on our connection to our soul, to our divine self, to help guide us in whatever decisions we need to make. It is, however, interestingly enough, at the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. By that, what we mean there is that, so we have Saturn here and Uranus there, and smack dab in the middle, we have this new moon. So it's at the midpoint of Saturn-Uranus. That generally means it reactivates the energy of that aspect. So even though we see a lot of, to me, lovely energies in this new moon, we're not out of the woods, you might say, because that Saturn-Uranus square is really active at this time. Now the Libra full moon is on the 28th. So there's the moon. Here's the sun, conjunct Chiron, conjunct Venus, but not just conjunct, they're all at the same degree. So this is pretty powerful in saying, what do we need to heal? Chiron is in Aries. This is usually the wound of feeling like I don't exist or I don't have any rights. But this is meant to be a healing time. And if you look at what's, putting this in quotes, what's wrong with us, I hate that phrase that I just said, but One of the challenges that we're dealing with that's showing up through the Saturn-Uranus square is that, almost half of the people, maybe that's not quite amount, but a good portion of people feel like they're losing. And that's very Chiron in Aries. My needs don't count. And so this is one of our big challenges of 2021. How do we help people who feel disenfranchised? Not help them see the light, but how do we work together? This is, if not the biggest challenge, at least one of the biggest challenges of this whole Age of Aquarius ideal, because Age of Aquarius says everybody participates. Well, what if this other person who is supposed to participate doesn't believe what I believe, or they voted a different way? How the heck is that going to work? This really is a challenge, but this full moon is about coming to terms with that challenge, finding new ways to heal. So this can be called a very healing moon. The moon itself is in Libra. Libra is about balance and harmony in relationship. And then having Venus conjunct Chiron, conjunct the sun, we're very aware of people who feel left out. We're very aware of those who are angry. And this is our opportunity to say, how do we not just include, because that feels almost patronizing. How do we come to center? How do we find that balance? So I feel like this is a very important full moon. Some challenges, no doubt, and some emotions, because full moons always bring forward emotions. But this is an opportunity for us to do some healing, and on a personal level as well. Venus is personal relationships. So if there are relationships where there's been a rift, there's been, a separation, this is an opportunity to say, how do we heal? How do we find the bridge between these wounded pieces of us? All right, so here we are in April. All right. Now, as we start April, we've got all of the 10 primary planets, plus Chiron, Ceres, and Eris, are all moving direct. That'll change by the end of the month, but when all the planets are moving direct, it supports forward motion. Like, it's nobody's standing back there saying, well, I need to go look over my notes again. This is all about, okay, let's move forward. Let's take the ship into the new territory. I think Mercury going into Aries is going to, really inspire those novel ideas and novel approaches, the new ways of communicating. For some people, it can be more self-centered. I mean, Aries is very self-aware, and sometimes Mercury in Aries tends to speak before it thinks. So that's something we do need to be aware of, but it's also really good for new ideas coming forward. And looky here. Pallas Athena and Uranus are in a positive sextile aspect on the 6th of April. This is lovely. So this is like the inventive ideas, the possibilities, the insights, it's everything coming forward that we want to think about. How do we resolve this? How do we solve this? Lay out the problems and say, okay, what's your brainstorm? What's your brainstorm? And it's also a day that Venus is sextile Mars, so that's helping people get along better. So if we're looking for a day to sit down and brainstorm with people that maybe we haven't always gotten along with, this would be a good day to do that. A little bit of relationship themes coming forward, and this will be true for the whole last part of the week, especially with this new moon on the 11th, where Venus is square Pluto. So we'll talk about that, of course, on the next slide. But it starts with Venus conjunct Eris here, and Mars squaring Neptune, and Mercury conjunct Chiron on the 9th. So this is a really touchy day. Maybe I should have put a little starburst here. It's not explosive so much, but it's a time when people's feelings can get easily hurt. It's a time when we may not be really clear about our agenda or our intentions. We may not communicate clearly. So just be really gentle around that time. Take your time to communicate and realize that even if you think you're speaking clearly, it may not come across in the way that you wanted it to. But then there's some very positive energies the next day. So if we do get some issues up there on the 9th, take the opportunity on the 10th, Mercury sextiling Saturn, to say, oh no, this is what I meant. And then Venus sextile Jupiter is an opportunity for a reconnection, especially in personal relationships. We will talk about this Venus squaring Pluto on the new moon, of course, but this is kind of a turning point for perhaps relationships or financial issues. You know, Pluto again is that energy of big transition, big change, death and rebirth. Venus square Pluto relationally can bring up, you know, issues that have been kind of behind the scenes, jealousies and suspicions and those kind of things. That's a very Pluto kind of moment. So just be aware that there's some of that energy still kind of brewing. So even though it feels like, oh, maybe we made some inroads back here on the 10th, there may be issues that come up here on the 9th that really aren't resolved right away. And then we look here on the 13th, a lot of Eris energy, especially Sun conjunct Eris. And we know that Eris is kind of the discontented goddess. And so, you know, there's some positive energies here. Mars is sextile Eris, Sun is sextile Mars. So this is an opportunity to take some really independent action, but it may not be the best day to try to build bridges with others. It's more independence, and this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to go after it. Jumping to the 16th, Sun squaring Pluto. Again, we've got some of the intensity comes back in. That's also the day that Mercury is conjunct Eris. So both of those are more intense and more confrontational. But at the same time, we have Mars trining Jupiter, and this is the ability to go forward, to move forward in new ways, to take advantage of the new ideas and to take some new risks. So there might be a little bit of pushback, or maybe a lot of pushback with that Sun squaring Pluto, but there is a lot of energy here for new action, both back here on the 13th and then here on the 16th. And then again on the 17th, yeah, Mercury, lots of ideas, wanting to jump forward, take advantage of the moment. We do have to look at Mercury square Pluto and Mars quincunx Pluto. Those are both hard aspects to Pluto again. So there's some intensity there, some argumentativeness, some sense of somebody doesn't want me to do that, or I don't want somebody else to do that. So I'm going to kind of try to control them or manipulate them. So just be aware that that's a part of that energy as well. But here we've got Sun conjunct Mercury, again, an opportunity to bring forward new ideas. And then on the 19th, both of those planets enter Taurus. Taurus is very substantial, it's very practical. So it's interesting that Sun and Mercury align when they're in Aries. So the new ideas, but then, okay, here we're going to implement them. Now on the next day, on the 20th, this is interesting because this is Jupiter's semi-sextile Pluto. This is not a major aspect. Most of the time I might kind of jump over it. However, any interaction between two slower moving planets can be important. And this is also the first time Jupiter and Pluto have interacted, the first aspect they've had since they had their 3 times of alignment in 2020. And if you recall, each time Jupiter and Pluto aligned, there was a surge in the cases of COVID-19. There was more and more tension. Jupiter was amplifying the transformational qualities of Pluto. But here we have Jupiter semi-sextile Pluto. So I feel like this is a very positive energy. It's subtle, but it's an opportunity for us to come to terms with the big changes that have been going on. So it's kind of like we're wrapping up this four-month period saying, okay, I get it. Yeah, this is way different, but I'm learning how to have faith anyway. I'm learning how to feel like there's possibility anyway. It's helping us come to terms with all the profound changes that we've been through. It's teaching us how to move forward in new, more empowered ways, and with greater social and self-awareness than before. So I may be giving that more influence than it warrants, but I'm looking forward to that as a positive energy. So, but we kind of are wrapping up the month here with kind of a wad, a wad of things. We've got Venus conjunct Uranus and Venus squaring Saturn. So Venus is triggering the influence of the Saturn-Uranus square. So this could be a very eventful time in relationship. Venus conjunct Uranus is, I need my freedom, I need my space, or let's find a different way of doing this. Venus squaring Saturn is decision-making time. So this can be a time when we come to terms with what we really want. Ultimately, Venus is about what we value, just kind of like the way we can look at how it can rule both relationships and finances. It's what we really value, what we can say we love. So this can also be a time when we look at our values and say, I really need to change something, and this is what it needs to look like now. So there's both a change mechanism going on here, but then a coming into clarity on some level. Now, right in the middle here, we have Mercury conjunct Uranus. So that to me is fascinating, because when Mercury and Uranus come together, this is novel idea. This is a new approach. This is progressive ideas. This is, oh, I never thought of that before. This is the aha moment. So it's kind of cool that we've got a lot of aha moments going on here. Now, again, Venus does square Saturn, so then we have to say, well, what does that really mean? All of these great ideas and aha moments I had, what does that mean for my relationships? And then here on the 25th, Mercury's conjunct Venus and squaring Saturn, it's saying, okay, well, and how do I communicate this? I've had the idea, I've come to terms with it. It feels exciting to me. How do I speak my truth? Mercury square Saturn means there's a bit of a challenge involved, but Mercury's conjunct Venus. So I think ultimately there's a sense of, okay, they may not get it all the way, but they get me. So there's some positive energies in there. We'll talk about the full moon on another slide. Pluto does go retrograde on the 27th. And again, remember that when a planet goes retrograde or comes to its station, it's going to change direction. It's stronger. So interesting that, the week before, we had Jupiter semi-sextile Pluto. So that was when Pluto was already moving very slowly. So that kind of puts in even more emphasis on that semi-sextile that we talked about. But remembering that Pluto is the planet of deep change, death and rebirth, does bring up intensity, and it is right here after the full moon. So just be aware that there's some stronger emotions around that time. And then by the end of the month, the very last day of the month, Sun is actually conjunct Uranus. It's going to square Saturn within the first week of May. But this is, again, activating the Saturn-Uranus square that we've been talking about. So really, throughout, even though we've seen a lot of very, kind of opportunities coming here, we're really having to pay attention to then again to all of that Uranus Saturn square energy, because it's really emphasized really through the last 2 weeks of the month. So again, keeping your eye on the prize, going back and looking at that list of positive potentials in the Saturn-Uranus square and saying, how can I put my focus on those positive potentials? And how do I stay in my heart? How do I stay in my center? Call on your divine self. These are aspects of our being that are there for us. And just by calling on them, they are there. That's their job. That's their job, to be there for us. So just a review of that Aries new moon, which was back on the 11th. So, oh, this is way wrong. I have the wrong degrees here. So my apologies. I did not fix that. So it's 22-25 Aries. So I'm going to have to send you a new PowerPoint, Elsie, before you send it out. So this seems very relationship oriented. It's conjunct Venus, which is about, peer relationships, love relationships, all kinds of relationships. But it's also conjunct Ceres, which is about family relationships. So there does seem to be a theme here. We were looking at relationship themes throughout the month, especially towards the end of the month. So that's really initiated here at the time of the new moon. The challenge is that this new moon is squaring Pluto. So again, it tells us that this lunar cycle is about some pretty big changes in relationships, in financial situations. And we do know that there are going to be some economic challenges in the year to come. So this might be a time when we become more aware of that, and it becomes important to make some new choices. But also look at this. We've got the Sun and Mars halfway between. So here's another midpoint moment. Halfway between Mars and Jupiter. But Mars and Jupiter are in a really positive relationship. They are trying each other. So the Sun and Moon, this new moon at that midpoint, really draws on the positive potentials. The Mars openness to new experience in Gemini, the Jupiter willingness to take risks, to broaden our concepts of what's possible, being in Aquarius. So challenges here, but also some opportunities, I believe. And then the full moon on the 26th is in Scorpio. Moon in Scorpio, Sun in Taurus. Now this is a big one because look here, we've got the Sun very close to Uranus. And actually what's happening is that we've got, got a T-square formed between the Sun and the Moon, which are always opposite at a full moon. And then both of them are in square aspect to Saturn, which makes a T-square. So this becomes important because a T-square says, okay, there's some tension here that needs to be addressed. So, and that part of the tension is related to Saturn. So Saturn, when it's under stress, doesn't want to move. It's very resistant. It has a purpose. It just wants to stick with it. It doesn't want to change its track. It can be uncompromising, even controlling. So this can be a time when some of those kind of things come up and there's resistance to them. Again, this is really activating the Saturn-Uranus square that we're dealing with. And so we are likely to see some social unrest. Again, it's a full moon, so emotions are heightened anyway. I don't believe that it's at the same magnitude as what we're seeing this month. I really do feel, as I said, that January, February, especially January, are the two most challenging months of the year. I haven't done a lot of exploring into May, June. I'm starting to write the May, June forecast for the Mountain Astrologer. I have not written it yet, so I haven't really explored it, but my sense is that things do start to ease, especially, after February and especially after April, that we start to move forward in some new ways that feel productive and we're not feeling under so much stress and tension as much as we have. So remember that with the T-square, this calls for flexibility. At the time when we feel less likely to do that, these are all fixed signs: Moon in Scorpio, Sun in Taurus, Saturn in Aquarius. These are all fixed signs. No, I'm going to do it my way. I'm digging my heels in. The call is for greater flexibility. So make that your challenge, a personal challenge at this time. How do I remain flexible? How do I go more with the flow? All right, so that takes us, oh, I have one more slide to share. So this is gonna make me cry. So Jane Jennings, I've just run into her through Facebook and I love her wisdom. So she posted this a couple of days ago. So I just want to read this because I feel like holding on to these words are going to be really helpful and hopeful. And I think they're very true. So you, my dear friend, are the key to healing our world. For every action you make, from deepest compassion, connecting into your expansive heart field, from gentle kindness, all and more of this changes your vibration from fear to love. The more time you spend in fear, your field of awareness contracts. It leaves you small. This is why the ancients asked of us to observe our emotions and take the daily actions to welcome the newness of each day into our lives. So gently invite yourself. What can you do this day to transform your fear into love? Becoming your soul self is the key we are searching for. Slowly rise, dear one. You are the change. Okay.
That was great.
So it's hard for everybody to talk right now, I imagine.
Yeah. So we have a lot of nice comments. And I want to let everyone know that I will be sending out the replay, video replay, an audio replay. You'll get the calendars again, as well as the PDF slideshow. So thank you all for joining us. And we have some wonderful comments, Pam, and I'll get any last words from you. And then if I'll stop the recording, and then if anybody wants to make some comments, you know, I'll unmute everyone. Okay.
Yeah, so just my final words would just be, I can't say it better than that last quote did. It does bring tears to my eyes because this is the key. And it's a part of our challenge to be all that we came here to be. And in a time, especially when we feel powerless, this is when we can be the most powerful